Hi, my name is Sarah, and today I'm going to be experimenting with charcoal. I'm going to be using soft, medium, and hard compressed charcoal, as well as vine charcoal. I'm a visual artist myself, so I am pretty well versed in using charcoal. However, I have never used it in an experimental way like this, so I am very excited.
Her paper is soon filled with dense black lines in rhythm with her hands and arms, becoming blacker and blacker until they are covered up to her elbows with soft, rich, chalky darkness. She smiles and finally looks up at the others around her, holds up her hands like small claws. With a hint of surprise in her voice, she tells the others she's becoming a gargoyle. This quote holds so much value because this child is not caught up with how messy she is getting. She is allowing herself to become completely immersed in this medium, which allows her creativity to thrive. The charcoal has transformed her, and it allows her to enter a fantasy world full of imagination. The child is not thinking about how messy she is and how she needs to wash her hands. She's picturing herself as a gargoyle. She is captivated by the charcoal, and it allows her to take her wherever she pleases. In life, sometimes I find myself going through the motions without taking note of my senses being activated. With everything moving so fast, I miss out on recognizing how my experiences truly make me feel. Charcoal in itself carries so much power. It has the ability to be creative using so many different forms. I can crush it, rub it all over my hands, and get very messy. That in itself holds value. Sometimes as adults, we need these moments to let loose and allow things to be messy and unconventional. I am starting my exploration with soft charcoal. As I begin, I notice how hard and cold it is. I find it more difficult to be smudged than I remember, perhaps because it is brand new. The marks on the paper come off very light and lack the intensity that I know charcoal carries. I noticed that when I broke off the corners, it became much more inviting, creating a powdery texture and much easier to smudge. As I switched to the medium and then the hard charcoal, I started to get the hang of it a little bit more. I began to experiment a little bit with water, which is something I've never tried before. Combining water with charcoal, the results were actually quite interesting. It caused the material to expand a bit more when I rubbed it. I began to really let loose once I started breaking and crumbling the charcoal in my hands. I used my old charcoal for this, and I felt that the old previously used charcoal was a lot easier to deal with. I then tried out a splatter tool that I typically use for painting. I wanted to see what kind of textures I could get when I rubbed it over top of the crumbled charcoal. I once again tried experimenting with water, and I was able to make some very interesting splatter designs. I was very reluctant to use water with charcoal as it felt a little bit unusual, but I noticed it start to become a lot more interactive and unique when I started to let loose. I decided to use a paintbrush next to see how the charcoal would behave if I treated it like paint instead of charcoal itself. The results from this were very entertaining for me, and I loved seeing the material come alive with vibrant, rich blacks. As I steer into this more, I completely immerse my hands into the water and let my hands be the guide. I then take some crumbled charcoal and start smudging it, and this is where it became very fun. The texture with the crushed charcoal mixed with a tiny bit of water created such a smooth feel. I decided to just go for it and completely smudge my hands all over the paper. Now my hands are completely covered with charcoal. I decided to try using a sponge for texture. I decided to use water for this because I've been enjoying how the water has been interacting with the charcoal. Needless to say, this created some very interesting streaking, and I started to really enjoy exploring it. I even used an old toothbrush. I wanted to splatter the wet charcoal all over the paper, and I felt such a childlike whimsy as I just let the whole space become messy. Now, as you can see, I'm really letting loose and just smudging the charcoal all over the paper. And using an eraser, I'm seeing what kind of textures that will bring in. As the eraser gets fully coated in the black charcoal, the eraser itself then becomes almost like a paintbrush. Next up, I'm starting on a fresh piece of paper with the vine charcoal. I was being very loose and scribbled with it, so it did break, but I did not let that stop me. I used a piece in each hand to create even more marks on the paper, and I really enjoyed smudging that out with my hands. I felt as though the vine charcoal was even more welcoming than the compressed charcoal. It was creamier right from the start. At the end of this experiment, I reflect on how I felt when I started. I began noticing the material was hard and cold and not very smudgy, almost as if I was simply drawing with a pencil. As my process became more unconventional, I truly noticed the charcoal turn dark, velvety, and powdery. As I went on, the charcoal allowed my fingers and my other tools to spread it across the paper. The material invites me to participate by forcing me into getting myself completely messy. The charcoal itself did not react on the paper until I became completely engaged. I realize now that if I want to see the full potential of the material, I must let go of my worries and work freely. It insists on personal interaction, as human touch is what truly makes it shine. The material responds more the less careful I am with it. The more I touch it, the more it spreads out and allows me to truly create. The material activates more intensely as I crush it with my fingers. As I rub it between my hands with a little bit of water, it provides me with a beautiful, bold black color. It is almost as if the charcoal itself knew I was having fun and was providing me more of itself as a reward. This encounter is important to me because it made me look at charcoal from a different perspective. This time, I was not making an art piece. I was not putting any intention and thought into making it beautiful. This was truly about exploring and connecting with the charcoal. It is an important lesson in everyday life that everything does not need to be so calculated. Sometimes allowing life to guide you can provide you with a much more enriching experience. When I started, I had a much more restrictive outlook on using charcoal, but as my experiment went on, I felt myself let loose a little bit and I began to truly enjoy the exploration of this medium. With my hands fully coated in black, I was able to finally understand what the child meant about becoming a gargoyle. I felt a childlike sense of creativity. Thank you for joining me as I explored charcoal and the power that it carries.